Elementary music teacher friend, you love what you do, but you might feel unappreciated and, in fact, unseen some days. You may even feel like you're on a music teacher island and just want to connect with other music teachers who can relate to both your struggles and wins when it comes to teaching elementary music. I get you and understand completely the feelings you're having. That's why each and every week, the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast will provide you with solo and guest episodes that will help you realize you're not alone in your music teaching journey. Throughout each episode, my goal is for you to be able to walk away with actionable steps and ideas to help you feel like you're ready to take on the new week with whatever challenges may be thrown your way. Hi, I'm your host, Jessica Peresta, and I'm so glad you're here. Whether you're at home, in your car, in the shower, or wherever else you're listening, grab your cup of coffee or whatever other beverage is nearby and listen in to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. Hey, music teacher friend, welcome back to the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. You're listening to episode 125, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about what to do if a lesson bombs. Now, I want to tell you, this happens to every single teacher, not just music teacher, to every teacher. There is a lesson that teachers, maybe you're listening and this even happened to you just this week, that you'll plan and you think it's going to be just like the best lesson of all time. And you are just in your head are so excited. You've put it down on paper, Google Doc, however you create your lesson plan, whatever that format is for you. But you just even looking at it, thinking about it, so excited to, implement this lesson with your particular class that you're teaching it to. And then lo and behold, you get these students in your classroom, or you roll a cart to their classroom, or you teach virtually, or whatever your teaching situation looks like. And it just does not go well at all. It's not the way you thought it was going to be. You thought this lesson was just going to go amazing, like I said. And it's all of a sudden just like everything is falling apart, like the train is derailing as it's going down the track. And you're in the middle of it going, well, I got to keep going because I still got 20 minutes left with this class. I can't give up. I got to keep teaching. So you go back to the drawing board and you start kind of thinking about what in the world just happened? What happened? And so maybe that's happened to you. And like I said, maybe this happened even today as you're listening to this podcast episode. I want to talk to you about 5 things to consider if a lesson bombs, okay? Because we don't need to feel defeated. You don't need to feel like you are not a good teacher if this happens to you, because I'm telling you right now, even teachers that say that's never happened to them, it's happened to them. Maybe not in an extreme way, but it happens to every teacher. Everybody has experienced lessons multiple times that do not go as well as you want them to. Sometimes it's just like a subtle thing where just one tiny thing in the lesson doesn't go like you want it to. And then sometimes it's the whole entire class period. You feel like nothing you're doing is working. But it does happen to everyone. And I'm sitting here right now raising my hand saying, this has happened to me so many times. But the thing I did not let it do is to derail me. I did not let thoughts come in my head of saying, you're not a good enough teacher. What are you doing here? Or, well, you might as well just give up because apparently you're not, teaching these kids music the way they need to learn it. No, I would go back to the drawing board and say, why did it not work? What can I do better? And those kind of things. And we are going to talk about those things in this episode. So the first thing to consider is the students. Right? I mean, that is what we consider a lot when we're teaching, is your kiddos. Now, these are the things to consider when you're thinking about your students. Did they have an off day that day? Was it one student derailing the class? Were there a few students? Was it the whole class was off for whatever reason? So thinking about that, maybe it wasn't the lesson per se, but it was the students you were presenting the lesson to were just having an off day. When you're teaching music, elementary music, that there are most of the time, unless you're at a small school, most of the time you will have multiple classes per grade level. So, for example, if you're teaching second grade and you've already taught this same lesson to a second grade class earlier in the week and it went amazing, but then this new second grade class comes into you and it is not going the way it went with your other second grade class. That's because the dynamics, which we've talked about on this podcast before, of each class is different. And so maybe that's what happened, is it's just the dynamic of that class. You can't present that particular lesson to them the same way you did to another class because they're not the same group of kids. So you may just need to change one or two things, adjust the way you present the lesson, which we're going to get into in a minute, to that particular class, because you can't cookie cutter approach it. You can't do things the exact same way because it's just not going to work that way. Maybe also when you're considering the students, thinking about, are there a lot of special learners in that particular class? Are you needing to maybe do a little bit more modifications and accommodations for that class because they can't learn it? You can't present the lesson the same way because you need to slow things down and modify it a little bit. Do you have students maybe that aren't ready for that particular lesson because they maybe haven't had a music class in a while? Or maybe you just need to go back and review some concepts before moving on to the new concept you're teaching. It's kind of when I equate it to math. You can't move on with higher level math if kids don't understand the foundations and the basics of adding and subtracting, right? And tens values and ones and all those things. So the same is with music. You can't move on with more complex things if they don't have the building blocks and the foundations of music ready and under their toolkit. And of course, kids experience music. It's different than math. They're going to experience music and learn it a lot differently by doing movement activities and a lot of repetition and stuff like that. But with that said, if you're teaching a new concept and it's not going well and you're like, okay, it's not that the students were off. It's not that they were having an off day. These kiddos loved to learn music and I can tell they're really focused and paying attention. Maybe it is just time to review some stuff, because you can tell that what you're teaching them might be a little bit over their head. And so it doesn't mean to not ever teach that lesson again. Maybe give it a couple weeks and tell the kids, you know what, you can tell they're getting frustrated and therefore it's causing you to feel frustrated. And so you say, we're going to try this activity again in 2 weeks. But before we do that, let's go back and review these concepts, review these certain songs we've done or these activities or whatever it might be. And then I promise you, when you go back and revisit that particular lesson you were teaching in a couple weeks, it will go way better than it did the first time. Okay, so that was number 1, is to consider your students. Number 2, consider how the lesson was presented. All right, so we kind of already touched on this a little bit when I was talking about considering your students. But when I say consider how the lesson was presented, is when you are teaching the lesson, was it just part of the lesson that did not go well? Or was it the whole entire class period from the minute the kids came in to the minute they left? When you are teaching this particular lesson, are you trying it the same exact way as you did it with your students last year? You know that your second graders are now third graders. Are you doing it the same way with the kids you did last year, with the new grade of students this year, and you're noticing it's not going as well? Well, that goes back to considering your students, back to number 1, right? You have to know that if you are presenting the lesson and you are trying it the same exact way, but you know it's not going as well, you do have a new group of students. Maybe you have a lot of new kids to your school. Maybe because of, I am recording this in the time of COVID, that they did miss some stuff. And so they are needing to, like I said, review things. Maybe that when you're presenting the lesson, they can't sit still a lot because they have been sitting a lot. And if they're virtual learning, there's going to be a lot of different things you need to do with that. And we're going to talk about that in my next point, by the way. But when you're considering how the lesson was presented, so think about, was it just part of the lesson? Was it just 5 to 10 minutes of that lesson that didn't go well? And if so, why? If so, then just reflect on that part of the lesson. Was it the entire lesson from the whole entire class period? And if so, then that goes, that'll kind of give you an inkling of, maybe I'm not doing the right warm up. Maybe I'm not doing enough breakdown in the lesson where maybe they're sitting too long. Maybe I need to do a little bit more movement things. Maybe I'm not presenting it clear enough for them to understand. If it is just part of the lesson and not the whole class period, then maybe you just need to think about that. Maybe presenting a song a different way or an activity a different way. So thinking about that when you're considering the lesson and how it was presented, part of the lesson, the entire lesson, will really help you to decipher where the breakdown happened and what you can do to move forward so it doesn't happen again. And maybe you're spending, like I said, too much time or too little time on something. Maybe you can tell the students completely understand the concept and then you keep going after they already got it. Then you're spending too long presenting that particular part of the lesson. If you're spending too little time on something, it means you've taught a concept and then you keep going, but you can see these glazed over looks. You know the looks I'm talking about. And the kiddos are looking at you kind of confused and you just keep going. Like you're like, I'm not stopping no matter what. I'm getting through this lesson. I don't care if my students understand what I'm teaching or not, but you can see they're confused. You're not spending long enough on a certain concept. So it's all these different things you need to consider. And a lot of this honestly happens with trial and error. And a lot of it happens by just getting in there and doing it. A lot of it is just by getting in there, trying something. If it's not working, sometimes it's not you, sometimes it's not the student, sometimes it's not the lesson. Sometimes it is all those things, sometimes it's none of them. It's honestly, when I have teachers ask me, how do I figure all that out? Well, it is honestly by just getting in there and doing it. And you will figure it out. You'll figure out the lesson breakdowns. You'll figure out, was it a whole lesson or part of a lesson? Was it the students? Was it you? By just getting in there and doing it and trying, you will figure it out. And it will be constantly ebb and flow to it because of the different kiddos you see each and every day and your personality and what you're teaching and the different, songs that are going on and all the things. There's going to be a different ebb and flow every single day. So number 2 was consider how the lesson was presented and all the things that go along with that. Number 3, consider your teaching situation. This year, in the year 2020, when I'm recording this and going into 2021, is totally different than any other school year, as you are 1,000, 2,000, 27,000% aware, right? Are you teaching virtually on a cart? And we've gone into all that before. Are you in person? Are you something else I didn't just name? This definitely makes a difference in how you're going to be able to present a lesson. And what is, where a lesson breakdown might be happening probably goes hand in hand with how you're teaching the lesson, right? You may need to adjust a particular lesson, which you're already doing because this episode's coming out in November, right? But you're going to need to adjust lessons based on how you're teaching it. What your teaching situation looks like will determine how you need to adjust and modify lessons and how to teach those lessons accordingly. You're not going to be able to teach it the same exact way in person as you do on a computer screen. It's just not going to happen. The kids aren't going to be able to pay attention or do the same things they would do if they were in a classroom setting with you like they are in a normal school year. So that is something to consider, is your teaching situation. If you're just trying to teach lessons the way you always have and you're not adjusting them and thinking about your students in their learning situation and not just your teaching situation, then you're not going to be able to teach those lessons the same way, is what I'm trying to get at. You need to really look at it and say, okay, I have taught this song the same way for 15 years, but this year with my students virtually learning, I may not be able to teach it the same way. I may not be able to even sing with my kiddos. And if not, how am I going to present this lesson? And go back to previous episodes where I talk way more about that. But I just want you to consider, if a lesson is bombing, maybe consider your teaching situation and maybe you need to just adjust some things. Adjust the way you're presenting lessons. Adjust maybe bringing more technology in this school year. Maybe that's out of your comfort zone, but maybe just find ways to do that. Find more ways to connect with your students and more ways to where they're still learning music, which is always the main goal to keep in mind, but maybe you're just presenting it and teaching it in a little bit of a different way. Number 4, consider your attitude. Now, that is something definitely to consider because I know for me, some of the lessons that didn't go as well were because I just didn't have a good attitude about it. Maybe I had something happen that morning. Let's just be honest. getting out the door to get to work, especially when I became a mom, getting my kiddo to daycare. Then sometimes he would have an off morning and he would be crying, or, oh, I forgot his diapers at home. And luckily the daycare had some for me. And then got to school. I was already feeling frazzled and pull in the parking lot. Oh, there wasn't a parking spot. By the time I got in the door and my first class was waiting for me because I was late, maybe I had a flat tire on the highway or whatever it might be. My attitude, let's be honest, to teach that very first class coming to me that day, not so good. Okay. It was like, take a deep breath, teach music, when I'm just like literally wanting to just sit there and take a minute for myself, but I didn't get to. So the lesson probably didn't go as well because my attitude wasn't as great as it could have been. Now, maybe nothing dramatic happened that morning. Okay. But maybe you're still just like not in it. Maybe you're just feeling a little off lately, or you're like, I don't really feel like teaching this song for the 1074th time since I started my teaching career. So maybe your attitude is not the way it should be, and your kiddos feed off of that. It's so true. If you're super enthusiastic about what you're teaching and you're so excited to teach this particular lesson, regardless of if you've already taught it before, regardless of if you are sick of teaching that particular song or activity, those kids don't know that. They don't know you've already taught it before. They don't know that this is your 1000th time to teach it when it's their first time to learn it. They don't know that. So going in with a good attitude, I know it's so hard. Listen to me. I hear you. I know it's hard to put your personal life to the side. It's hard to put everything going on right now in your teaching situation to the side. It's hard to say, I don't even feel appreciated in teaching music right now, and put that to the side and to still show up and teach music. I know it's hard, but these kids are there for you. They are there to learn from you. They are there because you're the music teacher and they want to learn what you're teaching. So with that in mind, keep in mind that the main goal, like I said, is for your students to learn music and for them to learn it from you. You are the reason they're learning music. So make sure you remember that. So if your attitude just is not where it should be, take 5 seconds, take a deep breath, say, listen, I have some things in my life or in my mind I need to decompress from, but it can't happen right now. Then maybe on your lunch break after your morning classes, go eat in your car by yourself. Take a quick break, take a deep breath, and go back in, finish the afternoon off strong if you're still in your building or whatever your teaching situation looks like, and then keep going, because I am a huge believer with students to not take out whatever's going on in your life out on them, if that makes sense. Like your attitude should not be, whatever's going on in your life should not reflect onto your students. That has nothing to do with them, okay? So when you are presenting a lesson, if you feel like you're just kind of going through the motions, show up excitedly anyways. And a lot of times, here's what happens too. You'll notice you start the day with a sucky attitude. I'm just keeping it real, y'all. And what happens is when you make the conscious decision to still show up and teach with positivity, to still show up and teach with a good attitude, with excitement, with, I'm going to do this no matter what, it sometimes will turn your attitude around for you. I mean, I know I've started the day off sometimes with this, crappy attitude and just don't feel like doing it. Don't feel like going through I am going through the motions, and it's just so hard to show up. What happens is if I make a decision that my attitude is going to change, I'm going to show up with joy and I'm going to be in it no matter what, my attitude just naturally takes a turn for the better. And you'll notice you kind of leave school still thinking about whatever was going on that morning, but your attitude's a little better because you're showing up doing what you love. You chose to teach music because you love to. You chose to teach music because it is your career and what you enjoy doing. So, number 4, if a lesson bombs, maybe it was your attitude and maybe the way you're presenting music to your students that day, it's just not there. And so they're not really in it they're not really like excited to learn what you're teaching because you're not excited to teach it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense to someone. And number 5 is consider the day. What I mean by that is we all know as an educator, I think people who have never, been in a school, have never been a teacher, they do not understand what I'm about to say. But those of you listening, I'm assuming you're an elementary music teacher since the name of this podcast is the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast, or you teach kids in some capacity. You know what I'm about to say is true. If there's a full moon, if there's a rainy day, if there's a snowstorm coming, your kids' moods will be affected. Also, if there is class parties, some kind of event at school, maybe Santa's walking down the hallway that day, maybe there was a pumpkin palooza or whatever your particular school building has going on, your kids at your school that you are teaching, they will be affected by that, okay? So consider the day. What I mean by this is, if you know that there's going to be cuckoo craziness that particular week of school, think about that when you're planning your lessons. Think about that. Consider that. Don't just glance over it and go, oh no, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. I know that you will feel the most defeated when you're trying to teach a lesson that is not going to go over well that week, because it is one of those weeks. Maybe it's the week leading up to winter break, and let's be honest, you're not going to get much done that week. Okay, let's keep it real. So if that's the case, think about that particular day or that particular week when you are planning a lesson. And it may be you planned something super, super structured and it's just not going over well with your kiddos because they can't focus because there's so much going on in their little world that maybe it is just something where you need to change up what you're teaching that day. You know the expression, if you can't beat them, join them. I mean, that is so true as a teacher, isn't it? It doesn't mean you need to change your lesson every single time you see your students. And if, they're having an off day, I just need to change what I'm doing again. And it doesn't mean to never have lessons planned. Of course you need to. You can't do that every single time you see your kids, but leave flexibility in where you know that there's going to be off days and there's going to be days where you're not going to get to what you taught. And there's going to be days where you just need to change up what you're doing because of whatever's going on that day. And just keep that in mind. And then it won't stress you out as much when those days come because you're going to be like, all right, I got to stay flexible with this. I'm going to know that there's going to be days that come like this and I'm going to be okay with it. So with that said, rainy days, school events, maybe there's testing that week, you know what I mean? And the kids are just more squirrely than normal. And then you need to consider the day or consider the week. So those 5 points, let me go over them quickly one more time. 5 things to consider if a lesson bombs. Number 1, consider your students. Number 2, consider how the lesson was presented. Number 3, consider your teaching situation. Number 4, consider your attitude. And number 5 is to consider the day. I hope you got something from this episode. Hang in there. You're doing a much better job than you think you are. You are incredible. You're showing up each and every day, even on the hard days, even on the hard weeks, even when you maybe don't even know what's going on, because things keep changing when it comes to your teaching situation, your schedule, and what they're asking you to do with your students. But hang in there. You're doing a great job, and I am here to support you any way I can each and every week, and I will be on again next week with a new episode, so stay tuned. Have an amazing week, friends. Well, hey there. Thank you so much for listening into the Elementary Music Teacher Podcast. There is an exclusive Facebook group just for listeners of this podcast and any elementary music teacher called the Elementary Music Teacher Community Facebook Group. Come on over and join us there where we have conversations around the podcast episodes and encourage each other each and every week. And also head to my website, thedomesticmusician.com. I have some free resources there that you can download to help you gain traction in your classroom today, as well as the blog and the membership site and all kinds of other goodies to help you keep going in your music teaching journey. I cannot wait to keep connecting with you and encouraging you and spurring you on in your journey of teaching elementary music. Hang in there, have an amazing week, and I will see you soon.